This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
With a halacha share, which is entitled Drunken Damages on Purim. Hopefully you've got the handout in front of you. And the background story is simply this. Imagine you've got a Purim Suda tomorrow a week, and gets Leibedik, someone is drinking, and to add to the merriment and the excitement, let's call him Mendel. Mendel starts dancing, but he gets onto the table and starts dancing on the table, a Leibedik Purim Suda. To everyone's horror, suddenly the table breaks, Mendel is on the floor, and he has ruined your beautiful dining room table. So the party comes to a crashing end. And he goes home, Mendel sobers up. The next morning, he comes round, with a bunch of flowers and is very apologetic. Sorry for destroying your Suda and for ruining your dining room table. You say to him, little Mendel, my dining room table was very expensive. It costs more than a bunch of flowers. You owe me the cost of damages for a new dining room table. It's broken. So what is the halacha? What is the halacha? Does a Mendel the mazik, does he actually have to pay? Damage done as a shikar, as a drunk, is he liable for it? So it's an interesting area. And of course, we'll discuss damages done on Purim in a drunken state. Is a person chayav to pay? Is he liable to pay? That's the starting point is the Shulchan Aruch. The first box on the handout, if you're listening online, please email me at j.golker@gmail.com. The Shulchan Aruch said in Chesed Mishpat, Siman Reish Lamed Hey Sif Chaf Beis, Hashikar, a drunkard, Mekchoy Mekach Memkore Memkar Matnosav Kayemis. His transactions are valid. His sales are sales, his purchases are purchases, and gifts that he make are valid. However, if he gets so drunk, he is as shikar as light, as drunk as light. Of course, the biblical character who, when escaping from Sodom, gets drunk, he lives with his daughters, produces Ammon and Moab, etc. So what is the gather? What is the parameter of someone who is shikar kalait? He's acting, he's not aware of what he's doing. So he's got his actions are not actions, and he's like a shota, which means he's mentally incompetent. So if he's a regular drunk, his transactions are good, but if he's so drunk, he's shikar kalait, then he's like a shota. What is the halacha of a shota? Says the halacha in Sifchof, it's the next line there, Hashota ein mekcha mekach, etc., etc. His transactions are not valid. Now, Mendel could turn around and say, well, I was drunk and therefore I was not aware of what I was doing. So if he is only somewhat drunk, he's not yet at the stage of shikar kalait, that's not a defense. Damage done, he'd have to pay for. If he argues that he's as shikar as light, then maybe, perhaps, he's got a din of a shota, and therefore his transactions are not valid. So, is Mendel right? Well, he's only exempt if he's going to be as shikar as loads, but anything less than that, he'll be fully responsible. However, there is a Yam Shel Shlomo, the next box. The Yam Shel Shlomo says that hashikar, afilu higia yosim shichrusa shalit, even if he is as drunk as light, i.e., he's so drunk that he's unaware of what he's doing, mikol malkum chayiv b'tashlumin al kol hezekas. He is still chayiv in all damages that he causes. Continues the Yam Shel Shlomo, u'mashem askinen beperek hador, that which we say in Eruvin, the shikar kolek potim the misas beistin, etc. Malkin or so, hainu de potim medin shemayim. He's only exempt vis-a-vis his relationship to Hashem in his heavenly accounts. But he will be responsible for financially causing damage, and because he didn't stop himself and he caused himself to be drunk and to get into this situation, it's obvious that he's going to be liable for damages that he causes to his friends. A person is always considered responsible for his actions, whether it was by mistake, whether it was on purpose, whether he was awake or asleep, whether it was voluntary or involuntary. Tim Kane says the Yam Shel Shlomo, a great svara. Tim Kane, it's not going to live. You're not going to allow people to live a normal life. Why? Every person, if Reuven hates Shimon, so Reuven will start drinking. He'll get close to Shimon. He'll get close to his property. He'll cause damage for Yiftar, and he'll say, hey, I'm sorry, I'm Potter, I wasn't aware of what I was doing. He'll bring himself into that situation. So the Yam Shel Shlomo says that he will still be liable to pay, even if he is as shikar kolot. Okay, so the first line of argument of defense of Mendel the Mazik, that he is drunk, is not a defense. Because if he is not as drunk as Lot, then he's fully responsible. If he is shikar kolot, he is very drunk, and therefore he's not aware of what he's doing. That only exempts him for klapi shamayim. But vis-a-vis his financial liability, his chayav, says the Yam Shel Shlomo, to pay. Now, there may be another defense for the person who causes damage on Purim. And namely, there's a Mishnah in Sukkah. The Mishnah in Sukkah, Daf Mem Hei on the basis, box number 3, says, every day of Sukkot, they would go around the Mizbeach one time, and that day, Hoshana Rabbah, they would go around the Mizbeach 7 times. And they would snatch the lulav and the esrogim from the kids, and they would eat their esrogim. Why were they doing that? Says Rashi, because they would snatch it from the kids. That's not considered theft. It's not considered a sort of a breach of the peace. It's just a bit of fun. You know, the last day of Sukkot, you've shaken your little Nesra for the last time on Hoshana Rabbah. In my shul, in most shuls, what I think happens is there's a little kid or someone goes around collecting all their esrogim, that someone somewhere is going to make some nice esrog jam. But in those days, says the Mishnah, they would sort of play this game, they would snatch the esrogim from the kids to enhance the simcha of the festival. And it's not a problem of Gezel, says Rashi. Adds Tosfos, a crazy and amazing thing. We can learn from this that Ois and Bochrin. Think about this. When you go to a wedding and you feel the Bochrim are getting a little bit labodik, a bit too much, think about this Tosfos. Those Bochrim, in order to make the Chosin happy and to make it a labodik wedding, they come into the dance floor on their horses. And they joust with each other. Can you imagine? You go to the chassan and you go to the dance floor, and suddenly Bochrim come on horses. There are 2 horses coming towards each other. They've got the jousting sticks to try and knock the other guy off. The Kohen Bigdash Chaver, they can cause damage by tearing the guy's clothes. And Mekalkal Suso, they could cause injury perhaps to the horse. Shein Paitrin, they're potter, says Tosfos. They're exempt. It's all part of the fun of being at the wedding. So you see, there's a very good precedent that fun damage caused through either the Simcha of Purim or the Simchas Chosim, it would seem to be okay. Moreover, the Beis Yosef quotes the Trumas Hadeshen. The bottom box, the Trumas Hadeshen says, the food, that let's say everyone's getting a shlachmonas and you're getting homentashen and all nice food, and I take his homentashen, he takes my drinks, or whatever it may be, even if I don't do it with permission, there's no problem. Mishum Simchas Purim, you're doing it just because of the Purim festivities, the Purim fun. Mishas Kriyas HaMegillah Adlel Sudas Purim Shnei Leilis V'Yem Echad, from the nights of Purim, i.e. next Wednesday night, including Thursday day and Thursday night, i.e. 2 nights on one day, Ein Bohem Mishum Geneva V'No Gezela. There's no issue of theft over there. And Ve'ein Lazminu Lebeistin, you can't sue the guy. You can't say, hey, you stole my homentashen, you stole my bottle of whiskey. So long as it's not crazy. So long as it's like relatively normal that I'm taking a bit of his food, he's taking a bit of my food, but I'm not causing excessive damage, etc. Venerally, says the Beis Yosef, I don't like this. That was in those days. That's how they behaved. That was their custom. Onu, says the Beis Yosef, the author of the Shulchan Aruch, Onu, this is not our practice. There is no distinction between Purim and the rest of the year. Okay, that is the Trumas Hadeshen, and that is the Beis Yosef's rejection of that Trumas Hadeshen. So it would seem so far that Mendel the Mazik, who breaks this guy's dining room table, his exemption from Choshen Mishmit pot doesn't really apply, because as the Yam Shel Shlomo says, he's still liable to pay. And vis-a-vis the festival fun, the Simchas Chos and the Simchas Purim that the Mishnah in Sukkah talks about, Rashi, Tosfos, and the Trumas Hadeshen, etc. Well, the Beis Yosef doesn't seem to like that. However, turning over the page, the Ramah says in Shulchan Aruch, in Hilchos Megillah, and Hilchos Purim, Tov Reish Sadi Hey Halacha Beis, the Ramah says he brings this Trumas Hadeshen. Says the Ramah, V'yesh Oimrim, De'im Hizik Echad Es Chaveru Mikach Simchas Purim, There are those who say that if you cause damage because as part of Simchas Purim, you are exempt from paying. That is the Trumas Hadeshen. Trumas Hadeshen Siman Kuf Yud. And says the Mishnah Berurah, however, limits this. The Mishnah Berurah famously limits it with a bach. Says the Mishnah Berurah in Sivkot Yud Gimel, the bach mechalek ben hezek gadol lekoton. He differentiates between a large amount of damage and a small amount of damage. And therefore, ve'ein min hagliftar hepe hezek gadol. If it's a large amount of damage, then this remor doesn't apply, says the Bach. Moreover, the Mishnah Berurah says, Pirish in the next Sifkaten, she'osim mikach simcha v'l ein kiven lahazek his chayev. If he intends to cause damage, then he's definitely going to be chayev. It's got to be totally accidental. He was dancing around and he sort of moving his hands around and he breaks someone's glasses by mistake or something like that. But if he intends to damage, then for sure he's going to be chayev. So the Mishnah Berurah limits the Ramah. The Ramah does say that he is exempt. However, he will only be exempt from small damages, but not for large damage. How do you quantify that? Well, perhaps you quantify it that we can look at a Chashukei Chemet. The Chashukei Chemet, Rabbi Zilberstein, the great Pesach in Bnei Brak, the son-in-law of Rabbi Yashiv, and the husband Chaim L'Chaim, the brother-in-law of Chaim Kanievsky. He's got a very interesting case. This is from Eruvin Daf Samach Hey Omid Aleph. This is the question. Reuven, he says, Hishtake b'Purim. This is box number 6. He gets very drunk. Shikakolait. They can't tell between his right and his left. He's walking in the streets. He's going from one side to the next. He's very drunk, dangerous. And he's bashing in to parked cars. And he breaks the wing mirror of many cars. When he sobers up and he is back to normal, they come knocking on his door saying, hey, you broke our wing mirror. And he defends and he says, look, first of all, I don't remember a thing. I don't know what you're talking about. They show him some CCTV and say, hey, look, this is what you did. And he's smashing some wing mirrors. He's caused a lot of damage. He's got 2 defenses. Number one, I was drunk. I wasn't aware of what I was doing. And number 2, the Ramah says, if you cause damage because of Simchas Purim, then I'm exempt from paying. That was his defense. Says the Cheshek Shlomo, he goes through many of the sources we just mentioned. First of all, he says that the Gemara says that from the Gemara Eruvin, that a drunk person, mekach, etc., etc., then he's got a din of a pikeach, all his transactions are valid. If he's just a little bit drunk, then he's fully responsible. And even if he's very drunk, he's shikakolait, he doesn't know what he's doing, he's totally unaware of his actions, then he's potter from everything. But then he brings the Bach. The Bach only exempts him from small damages, but inexpensive damage that he's still liable for. And he then brings the Amshel Shlomo, etc., and other sources, and therefore he concludes that this person who breaks the wing mirrors will be chayev, because that is expensive damage. Now, I don't know how much a wing mirror costs. To replace the wing mirror could cost 100, maybe 200 pounds, with labor, etc. So that is considered expensive. So the Chashukei Chemed would say that is still considered hezek gadol. So coming back to our Mendel the Mazik, what is the story? So the story is he's got 2 lines of defense. One line of defense is I was drunk. That is a very limited line of defense, because if he is not shikar kolot, as drunk as lot, then he is fully responsible. His transactions, his actions are fully, they count, they're valid, and he is fully responsible for that. If he is as drunk as lot, although the Shulchan Aruch says that his transactions are not valid and he's not responsible, however, the Amshel Shlomo says the exoneration, the patur, is only klapei shamayim, but in Beis Din he will have to pay for any damages caused. What about the second line of defense? Can he say Simchas Purim? So according to the Mishnah in Sukkah, that would seem to be a defense. There's per Rashi and Tosfos over there. And the Beis Yosef quotes the Trumas Hadeshen. However, the Beis Yosef rejects that Trumas Hadeshen. However, the Ramah brings the Trumas Hadeshen and says that someone who causes damages mikach Simchas Purim is Potzim L'Shalim. So lechor, that would be a good defense. However, we have to caveat that by bringing the Bach, as per the Mishnah Berurah. He brings the Bach who says there's a difference between hezek gadol and hezek katan, a small amount of damage and a large amount of damage. Small damages, perhaps there could be a p'tur, but large damage is not. Even that, I should add, there's an Aruch HaShulchan. Aruch HaShulchan says It's in the second box in paragraph 5. For Achshav. Nowadays, says the Aruch HaShulchan, writing 100 plus years ago. For Achshav, I'm going to say no harabim. Arva kol simcha. Our ways of celebrating are different. It is not our minhag to celebrate in this way. You cause damage. And therefore, says the Aruch HaShulchan, if a person causes damage, for sure he's got to pay. And therefore, there's certainly in the earlier days any physical damage you would be liable for. So we gave a share, I think, in previous years about drinking on Purim, but regarding damage caused when drunk on Purim, there's a lot of Torah on it. But the long and short of it is, number one, more often than not, he's going to be liable to pay for any damages. And there could be Purim if it was done not because he was drunk, but because of Simchas Purim. But even then, we can differentiate between the large amounts and small amounts. And large amounts, he would certainly be liable for. Small amounts, perhaps he would be exempt for, as per this Ramah. However, the Aruch HaShulchan says that perhaps the minhag is different nowadays, and that is a dissenting opinion. But as the Ramah famously says, when it comes to drinking on Purim, echot hamarbe ve'echot hamamitz v'vachi chab nibel shemaim, is to only drink in suitable ways that will bring us closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu to enjoy the simcha of Purim in a proper and noble fashion.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.